Hello, and welcome to Spotlight On, the podcast that brings together business leaders, entrepreneurs, and experts covering a range of topics. I'm Nicholas Barton, founder and CEO of the Barton Partnership. We're an award-winning executive recruitment and consulting solutions firm providing permanent search and independent consulting services across strategy, sustainability and M&A, data and analytics, and transformation and change.
Hello, and welcome to the Barton Partnership Spotlight On podcast series. My name is Imogen Seear, and I lead our consumer permanent search practice across the UK and Europe. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Susan Hooper. Now, Susan's executive and plural career spans 40 years, first beginning at Wrangler and Saatchi, before joining top-tier global strategy consultancy McKinsey. Now, since taking a plural career 8 years ago, Susan now sits as a non-exec director for Uber, Moonpig, Eurowag, and as chair of Tangle Teezer. Given her drivers as a leader to deliver real impact and change, alongside her own passion for climate change, she has since co-founded Chapter Zero, working with fellow NEDs to work with boards to ensure they are equipped with the right information to address climate change. Susan, great to have you join us.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I guess to kick things off, you've had a fantastic, very successful executive career, but now, working on the boards of several companies, including Uber and Moonpig, non-exec director. Could you, initially walk us through what led you down both the exec and the plural career path, and then elaborate a little bit on what this entails for us?
Well, I think my executive and non-executive life have overlapped for about 15 years. So I've been plural non-exec for just over 5 years when I stepped down from my last executive role with British Gas. What led me through the executive career? It was travel, wanting to travel around the world, learn languages, have fun, work hard, achieve success in the eyes, through my interpretation of what that meant. And quite early into my career, I was exposed to non-executive director opportunities. And I think that was because I'd worked internationally and because I'd run businesses that there was an interest in having me join boards. And I found the overlap between the two really useful because actually when you're sitting on a board of a different company in a different industry and you realize that they're going through similar issues to you, it gives you a different perspective and insight into how to solve those problems and how to deal with them. And plus, it gives you new contacts with which to help you to solve the issues that you're dealing with in your company. So I didn't really have a master plan. Opportunities arose. I took them. I either kept with them or didn't. And I've sort of ended up on the plural only by default, I'd say. It's sort of what you do at the end of your exec career. But increasingly, I have started to add to it through working on a particular theme of sustainability and what I can do at board level to impact the outcome over the next 3 to 5 years of these companies.
That's great. So out of interest, you have had a very diverse career when it comes to even, thinking about sector diversity through kind of food and beverage, so travel, energy utilities space. Would you say that has been beneficial when you've thought about moving into this kind of plural career, as you say, working on a variety of different boards? Has that elevated your kind of status amongst that?
Well, it's really funny. I think first and foremost, you have to say you need to do what you enjoy doing and not try and plan it necessarily. Because when I started, sticking with one company and one sector was considered the thing to do. When I finished my exec career, it was the exact opposite. And because of what I had done, because what I wanted to do and I enjoyed doing, it now serves me well. So I don't think the answer is yes, it did. But I also managed to do well in the jobs that I was in. And doing well really ends up setting you apart, as opposed to, planning to have diversity of career path or whatever. And I also think it's important to remember that even though I crossed industries and countries and companies, there was a red thread through all of that, which was customer centricity, customer insight, and strategic turnaround. In almost every single role I went into, that was what was required, and that was what I was able to deliver, and that's what I enjoyed doing. So I can comment on what I did, but I'm not saying that that's right for everybody. It's got to be right for you to succeed, because that ultimately is the most important thing. That's what will set you apart.
Definitely. And what would you say would be a key of success when navigating different sectors?
As with any new role, you have to really roll up your sleeves and get into the sector as quickly as possible, because there's always new learnings to have, new systems, new approaches, new acronyms. That comes with every company, actually, not just sector. And I know when I went from FMCG to travel, I thought, no problem, 1 year and I'll get it. And it was really complicated. And it took me a good year and a half, to feel that I was in the saddle and understood all the systems and how things worked. I think if you do change sectors, you have to be prepared to really invest time if it's a new one to you, because they are different. But then at the end of the day, when you've done that, you do have the benefit of having two perspectives, at least, from over the two industries you've been in. And there's no question that bringing in new thinking into the sector you go into as a result of that is valuable, and you bring that value with you.
Definitely. And it probably relates to my next question, actually, which was around, in what ways have you seen your diverse experience strengthen your position in the boardroom?
It's not just sector experience, but actually experience of different roles. I have seen the operating roles that I've had be very welcomed, because it does give you an overlay of practicality and reality, everyday targets that you need to achieve. That sometimes you have to make trade-offs with strategic opportunities, because you just can't walk away from something that's running on a day-to-day basis. So I think, as I say, in the latter years, the sector diversity has really paid dividends to me, which was never in the plan. But I think what really has helped open doors for me in board roles has been the fact that I've covered so many different roles in running companies, and how that helps temper and put a dimension to the recommendations and advice that I give at board level.
Fantastic. Now, moving on a little, we talked around your exec and non-exec career have overlapped a little, but you have really started to expand more recently, particularly around sustainability. So, for example, in March 2019, you co-founded Chapter Zero, an organisation that aims to equip non-executives with the skills and knowledge to lead important discussion on climate change. It would be great if you could share a little bit about Chapter Zero's mission and impact for us.
Sure. It might be useful to just talk about the genesis of that, because I was invited to a dinner at Cambridge the year before, so December 2018. And the theme of the discussion was, why is it that boards don't have climate change on the agenda? So this was end of 2018. And I sat on 6 boards at the time, one of which was an airline, and none of us had climate change on the agenda. And I went through sort of an epiphany at this dinner, where I was listening to reasons why it should be, and surrounded by a few other non-execs. And we were extremely moved by this situation that, one, we realized we'd been part of the cause, because, during our lifetime and our career time is when the emissions increases have really taken off. 2, most of us have children and care about their futures and want to make sure that we're not going to be blamed unnecessarily for issues that we have caused if we haven't tried to rectify them. And 3, and most importantly, we were all in positions of influence where we could make the difference. We could make a difference to the outcome. We could help put that on the agenda. So it was quite transformational to have that experience, with the most important part of that one realizing being that, I am in a position to do something about this. I should be doing something. And literally on the train back from Cambridge to London, the idea of Chapter Zero emerged. And we started working on it pretty much immediately after that, and pulled it together in order to do what we could do to help others go up the learning curve about what they need to know on climate change, in order to ensure that the companies that they oversee come up with the right solutions in the next 5 to 10 years to reduce emissions and carbon dioxide. And it's been a bit of a mission and a passion, and we've just taken off, really. We're now with 2,400 members in the UK, all board members, and growing every month, I would say. And we have 53 chapters worldwide. We don't run them. They are mirrored on the Chapter Zero format, which we worked on together with the World Economic Forum. And we now realize we've got some clout to be able to move the agenda forward, which is exactly what we set out to do.
Fantastic. I mean, it's great to hear the backdrop, and really interesting. It must have been sort of one of those light bulb moments at that dinner in terms of sitting there together, realizing it.
I think, though, it's important to say at that time, and that's not that long ago, the fact that I was then raising this issue at board was not an easy one. It was not, at that point, investors hadn't really got on the bandwagon with the force that they now are. And it was a very enlightening experience for me, because luckily I was passionately believing that I should be doing something about this, but it would have been easy to say, walk away from it and say, well, it's going to ruffle too many feathers. It was a big learning for me, quite late in my career, to be honest.
No, it's really interesting, because I was going to ask in terms of what were some of the biggest hurdles that you were faced with, or some of the biggest challenges in those earlier days.
Prior to the investors becoming active, bringing up the topic of sustainability, even on some of the most obvious boards, really made me feel like I was a rather negative activist. And I remember in one situation, it dividing the board, actually, quite literally, into the camp that felt that anyone who talked about this and would indicate that what the company was doing was not in the interest of the environment was not loyal to the company. And it's and luckily, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't the lone voice. I think it's really hard when you're the lone voice, if you believe in something like this and you've got evidence, to support it. But that is still the reality in many boards. And luckily, I would also say the investors and a lot of the consumer activism that's gone on has raised the awareness, has passed the baton somewhat to the employees and consumers, and it's squarely on the agenda now. But sometimes facing the hard truths is difficult to deliver at board if you're the lone voice.
No, I can understand, because it's interesting you talk around the consumer angle, and I do wonder if it is the case that, consumer businesses, frankly, are leading the way. But how have you seen attitudes to climate change, vary in the last few years? And we could liken that perhaps to more consumer-facing businesses, but keen to understand what differences that you've seen as of late.
Oh, it's changed radically, even in the period since 2018 to now. It's hard to really put my finger on one thing. And from a company perspective, and by the way, what's interesting, and we've seen this with COPs successively, is that increasingly business is leading the way instead of government. And by the way, change would happen so much quicker if government would introduce policies and regulation for what companies need to do, because it would level the playing field. It would set the standards that everyone would need to adhere to. I'm not saying they'd always be right, but at least they would have them. Now, companies, some feel that if they do this, they'll be uncompetitive. And if they do the right thing, others will take the forefront away from them. And so it's really, you've got to be pretty strong leadership in companies to do the right thing. But increasingly, that's becoming much, much more common. But what you're also finding is that a number, and in my mind, it boils down to leadership, and the leadership being primarily the CEO, secondarily the chair and the board. But if the CEO doesn't really embrace this issue, you have this risk of greenwashing, which is very detrimental to company reputation and consumer loyalty as well. So the fact now that companies are having to change because the investors are putting pressure on them, because their board members are becoming more informed, and because consumers are taking a stand, is making this a very real topic. within business. But I'd always look to the leadership to know whether this is genuine or whether it's seen as a box-ticking exercise that is just being required right now.
Definitely, because I was going to ask around your thoughts on what good leadership looks like, frankly, in relation to this topic. So really what I'm getting from you is it's got to come from the top down. It's got to be the voice of the CEO.
Yes. If the CEO doesn't genuinely back this, it's not going to move very successfully. And I do think we are in a transition period for many, many reasons, but from a leadership point of view, the way you solve this problem is up to the individuals working in the company at the time. There is no book you can pull off the shelf to tell you what to do. We're working it out as we go, which is sad, but it's the reality. It is where we are today. So the type of leadership is not, I know what the answer is, here you go and do it. It's working collaboratively, both within the company and outside of the company, to work out the best way of getting, the quickest way possible of getting to the right place. And that takes a lot of risk. And most companies don't like risk. We try and mitigate risk. And yet we know full well on this one that we're going straight into a very risky situation.
You sit as chair on the board at Tangle Teezer,
yes,
where you're playing a vital role in delivering the company's sustainability goals and commercial strategies. So, how do you work with the rest of the board and the CEO to help champion those?
Well, fortunately, I am not a vital link. I'm a contributory link to solving this, our challenges. And I wouldn't say that Tangle Teezer is not at the forefront of climate change, but we have our challenges. And most importantly, the company really, really wants to do the right thing. It was one of the criteria of evaluation of whether I wanted to join this group is, what is your commitment to this? And the CEO and the whole company is exceptionally committed to it. What we did is pull in an innovation group. We did this for several reasons, but part of it was sustainability. And we've got several individuals from reputable institutions like Oxford, Cambridge, who are advising us on recyclable materials, durability of plastics versus recycling, and all of this stuff. And we've got a 6-year program now where we are developing materials and products that will get us to the best place possible with regards to emissions and environmental impact. It's not going to happen tomorrow, and anyone who tells you it's going to happen tomorrow is most likely not, unless they're throwing a ton of money at it, is not telling you the truth. But we've got a really clear plan of what needs to happen in what time frame in order to make our situation in 2030 significantly better than where we are today. And we're doing this even though customers aren't asking for it. And that, to me, is the right thing to do. And this, by the way, I think is one of the hardest things for politicians, because they tend to do what people ask them to do or want to do. And a lot of people don't understand the length of time it will take to adapt business and your own habits and lifestyle. So we've taken a lot of external counsel. We've got a very committed CEO and team and board, and we are ready to take the risks needed to get us as quickly as possible to a much better place.
Fantastic. That's really great to hear. I guess more broadly, how optimistic are you that we'll meet our net zero targets for 2050?
This is a really difficult one to answer because I am a stubborn optimist on this topic. However, I think we've already realized that 1.5 is no longer going to happen. I think there are ways that we could change that in terms of focus and dedication of resources. My heart drops every time I hear, well, we can't solve climate change because we have a cost of living crisis. And unfortunately, the clock still ticks on climate change, regardless of what other issues and crises we have. And we just have to work out how to do all at once. And I'm not terribly optimistic about 1.5. I'm fighting for 2, which is not good. 2 is not, it sounds like, oh, well, what's the difference of 0.5 degree? Well, a whole ecosystem can disappear with that 0.5 degree. So it is seriously important. And the other aspect of that realization is rather than talk about how to solve the emissions, you start to involve in your planning adaptation to a 2-degree world, which is significant. It means for a lot of infrastructure reinforcements and changes, lifestyle changes. I'm afraid I don't hold out hope anymore on 1.5.
Understood. I think that the important piece here is, as you say, it's about keeping this very much at the forefront. We can't, yes, there are the challenges ongoing in the current climate, of course, but this needs to remain a top priority and almost not allow itself to get deprioritized.
The thing I try and encourage everyone to say is this isn't a project. This is corporate strategy now. It is the way we have to do business going forward. So actually, you shouldn't need to have a chief sustainability officer. You shouldn't need that because it should be embedded in your strategy. I think sometimes to make it embedded, you need those individuals, the infrastructure in place to make that happen, the expertise, so that we all get up the learning curve quickly to understand what that means. But this should be corporate strategy. And if it's not, if it's a side project, you kind of can take the conclusion that it's not going to be effective.
Definitely. I think it was very, very sound advice and something that we definitely support our clients with on a regular basis. So thinking really around accountability here, as you say, we have been part of the cause, we're thinking about the future generations and our positions that individuals have in having powers of influence. On this note, Susan, what advice, I guess, would you give to those or thinking about the next generation of women starting their careers or looking to move into a leadership role in their respective industries, keeping in mind this power of influence that we have?
Well, this is something which I've been kind of grappling with a lot over the past number of years, specifically with sustainability. But I think that it's incumbent upon all of us to recognize that every role you step into, you have a sphere of influence that you can use to change what didn't work for you coming up through a hierarchy of your career. And I think it's critical that we don't worry about potentially rocking the boat or standing out as a result of standing up for something that didn't work for you or worked against you, in order to continue the rate of change that needs to happen to make our workforce, our environment more equitable and just. I've realized that in board roles, because sometimes you fall into them. It's just a natural progression after a good exec career. You go onto boards. But actually, it is probably the most influential position I've ever held in my career. I can change the outcome of a company 5 years from now by giving the right inputs at this point. But it's not just at board level. It's at every level. It's even at the most junior levels where you're involved in hiring decisions and so on, you can make a difference. I'm really kind of on my knees to people saying, don't underestimate the influence you have and the personal accountability you should feel for bringing in change that needs to happen.
Fantastic. I think that's a wonderful way to end the session, Susan. Thank you again for joining us. It's been great to have you here and I look forward to catching up with you soon.
All the best to you.